Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I am Adrian Ford, and we are here for some more poetry discussion. This coming to us from Charles Bukowski in You Get So Alone at Times That It Just Makes Sense. Page 197, titled Their Night. It reads as such. Never could read Tender Is the Night, but they've made a TV adaptation of the book. And it's been running for several nights, and I have spent 10 minutes here and there watching the troubles of the rich, while they are leaning against their beach chairs in Nice, or walking about their large rooms, drink in hand while making philosophical statements, or fucking up at the dinner party, or the dinner dance. They really have no idea of what to do with themselves. Swim? Tennis? Drive up the coast? Down the coast? Find new beds, lose old ones? Or fuck with the arts and the artists. Having nothing to struggle against, they have nothing to struggle for. The rich are different, all right. So is the ring-tailed maki and the sand flea. First, I think it's necessary to address the title, Their Night. And the poem is about rich people. But the subject of the poem is Tender is the Night, suggesting that Tender is their night. Tender is rich people's night. It is the rich who have tender nights, not everyone else. It's obvious here that Bukowski has a reverence for Fitzgerald. After all, he has tried many times to read Tender is the Night, but failed. And I think that it is the crystallization of seeing the things being played out that has triggered his realization of why he can't get through Fitzgerald's novel. And that's why we're getting this poem. And it could be summarized as rich people stuff. And rich people stuff is not that to which Charles Bukowski can rectify his situation. It is not like watching so the TV show Married with Children came along in the early 90s. I think it was the early 90s or late 80s, and was revolutionary. Much in the same vein which Roseanne was revolutionary. Because this was middle America, and this was lower middle class finding themselves represented on television. And they were able to identify with jokes. They were able to understand punchlines, and it created a large movement of similar shows. The Drew Carey Show, King of Queens, things like that. I don't know why I'm describing these things in television terms. The Simpsons. Maybe because the television show is what's referenced in this poem, but Bukowski is realizing that in literature, he has reverence for Fitzgerald. He can understand the talent that Fitzgerald possessed. But he still doesn't like him. He talks many times throughout his poetry of Hemingway and how much love he has for Hemingway. And Fitzgerald is always sort of hinted at, but never particularly admired. Not in my experience with Bukowski anyway, although I certainly have not read his entire canon. For me, something that I personally take away from this is seeing Fitzgerald broken down in this way makes me think of Bret Easton Ellis and realize that Bret Easton Ellis might be the modern day Fitzgerald. And I go back to the second time I read American Psycho, which was very close in time to me having reread The Great Gatsby. And it feels, American Psycho, a lot like a 1980s retelling of The Great Gatsby. These are East Coasters. People are often forgetting each other's names. The people are always going to parties or fancy places. The protagonist is more removed from the group through the eyes of others than through his own eyes. This is to say that people always forget Patrick Bateman's name or confuse it. Whereas in The Great Gatsby, people never really talk to Nick. Nick is there as a silent observer most times. Nick is just the camera through which the reader gets to experience the story. And it's just interesting in that way. I think that there are... I had a whole list of parallels between the novels that I can't remember off the top of my head, but does this mean that there is a modern-day Hemingway? I think that oftentimes Bret Easton Ellis's work is mentioned neck and neck with Chuck Palahniuk's work in the way that a lot of people like to put Hemingway and Fitzgerald together, even if they do not reference Hemingway and Fitzgerald's personal lives together. But again, in this poem, we have the idea represented in Bukowski that struggle authenticates character. That it is only through struggle that, where's the quote here? Where am I? Having nothing to struggle against, they have nothing to struggle for. Is that necessarily the case? Or is it necessarily the case that someone who is struggling with something so basic as putting food on the table, as Bukowski is often at least portraying himself or his speakers to be, unable to see the struggle that someone is going through when that individual has, more than the speakers through which Bukowski communicates. Going back to an earlier point that I made in this video, I think that Bret Easton Ellis does a much better job than does Fitzgerald at illustrating wealthy people struggling with meaning rather than sustenance. So, if we go back to having nothing to struggle against, they have nothing to struggle for. Someone who is incredibly wealthy might not have that much to struggle against on the surface, or obviously, or to the naked eye. But like I said, Bret Easton Ellis does a good job of illustrating what it is that person is struggling for, personal meaning. Bukowski, but it is difficult to show that struggle. It is difficult to illustrate that struggle, which is where Fitzgerald's writing suffered. Because in Bukowski poems, we are often shown hunger. We are often shown despair. We are often shown a cheating lover. We are often shown some wild but dependent cat who has nothing to eat tonight because neither does Bukowski. Or who does have something to eat tonight because Bukowski sacrifices it. That is the struggle against. Because of that, Bukowski has an easier job in showing the struggle for. And oftentimes, he will leave out an overt mention of the struggle for. Whereas in Fitzgerald's writing, oftentimes the struggle for is the only thing which is clearly indicated. So it comes across as whiny, as pretentious, because you go around making philosophical statements or fucking up at the dinner party, instead of the struggle for not having to be illustrated because the struggle against is so clear on the page. But that's all I have for this poem. It's just struck a couple thoughts, and I thought I would put them on camera. If you like this sort of thing, hit the like button. It really helps us out here on the channel. If you are stumbling across this poem, this discussion out of nowhere, and are not subscribed to the channel, maybe consider sticking around. and I hope to see you next time on Strip Cover Lit.